I keep seeing this wave of self-improvement content everywhere right now. People are waking up early, going to the gym, reading a lot more books, trying to completely change their lives. And honestly, I love to see it. Because for a long time, I think people, including myself, were just stuck. We're just wasting time, distracting ourselves, and wondering why we weren't happy. So seeing people finally decide enough is enough, I need to change something, is actually pretty inspiring. Because without self-improvement, I genuinely don't know where I'd be. I'd probably still have those same bad habits, the same excuses, and this YouTube channel probably wouldn't even exist. But there's a darker side to self-improvement that I don't really see people talk about. Because the same thing that helped me become a better person slowly became the thing that was making me miserable. And I think that's something that a lot of people experience but don't realize. So stick with me for the next couple of minutes because I want to talk about how self-improvement made me depressed. Not actually, but I just want to talk about it. The first thing we have to ask ourselves is why self-improvement is even so popular right now. And I think the answer is pretty simple. A lot of people just aren't happy with where they are. And I completely understand that. Because when I first decided I needed to change my life, it wasn't because everything was going great. It was because I looked at myself and I realized I was wasting so much potential. I was spending hours doing things that I knew weren't helping me and avoiding the things that I knew I needed to do. And there's a really uncomfortable feeling that comes with realizing you're the reason your life isn't where you want it to be. But at the same time, there's something motivating about it. Because once you realize you have control, you start wanting to take action. And I think that's where the self-improvement starts. You start replacing that instant gratification with discipline and choosing the harder thing to do because you know it's better for you. And I still believe that's one of the most important things someone can learn. But after a while, something kind of shifts because self-improvement has this weird way of convincing you that the person you are right now isn't enough. And I think that's where the problem begins. One of the biggest things I ran into when I was doing my self-improvement journey was this feeling that I was always behind. Because no matter what I did, there was always something else I needed to fix. And I think that's because self-improvement trains you to look for problems, which is pretty useful because that's how you grow as a person. But if you're constantly looking for what's wrong, eventually you're going to stop seeing what's right. And I noticed this especially with the gym, because when I first started working out, I remember thinking, if I could just do this better, if I could just look better, I'd feel more confident. And then eventually I made progress, started to, look different, felt stronger, and I was pretty proud of myself. But then the brain did what it always does, and it moved the goalpost. Instead of thinking about how far I came, it started focusing on how much further I needed to go, right? And that mindset just doesn't stay with your appearance because it follows you everywhere. You start thinking you're not successful enough, not disciplined enough, and eventually you create this version of yourself in your head that is always falling short. And that's so exhausting because imagine if you had someone following you around every single day telling you that you could be doing more. Eventually you're going to get tired of that person, but a lot of us become that person to our own selves. One thing I've noticed about self-improvement and this whole type of concept is that you've become so focused on who you want to be that you completely forget to appreciate who you've become. And for example, a quick character that, reminds me of this is Kaladin from the Stormlight Archive. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything if you haven't read that book, but I highly suggest to read it if you can handle all those books. But what's interesting about him isn't just how far he comes, it's that even after what he accomplishes, he still has a hard time seeing himself as someone who has grown. He goes from being someone who's just trying to survive to someone who leads and protects others, but his mind is still stuck on things he failed to do and people he couldn't save. And I think that's such a human thing because you can make insane progress, completely change your life, and still wake up feeling like you're behind because your brain is focused on the next thing you need to fix. Sometimes the hardest part of improving yourself isn't actually changing. It's being able to stop for a second and recognize that you already have. And another thing I noticed is that self-improvement can make you obsessed with optimization. And this is something I still struggle with. Because once you get into that mindset, everything starts to needing a purpose. You start thinking about how you can get more out of every day, how to be more efficient, and how to waste less time. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when you start treating every moment that doesn't improve you as a mistake. Because some of the best parts of life are completely pointless. You can't optimize spending time with your homies. You can't optimize laughing at something stupid or just making random memories. And I think that's something that I forgot because I was so focused on becoming a better version of myself that I forgot to actually experience my life. Because one day you're not going to remember every productive day you had. You're going to remember the moments that actually meant something. Those random nights, conversations, the experience you didn't plan. And that's the weird thing about life is the things that matter the most usually aren't things that look productive. And I think this is the question I eventually had to ask myself. Is self-improvement is great, but who am I or what am I improving for? Because if the entire point is to build a better life, but I'm miserable the entire way I'm there, then what's the point? There's this idea online that you have to sacrifice everything now so you can enjoy life later. And I totally understand where that comes from, but there are times where you have to lock in And then there are times where you need discipline. But I think a lot of people forget that the future isn't guaranteed. The person you're becoming is important, but the person you are right now matters too. Because you don't want to wake up years from now and realize you spent your entire life preparing to live. You don't want to become the person you always wanted to be and realize you missed everything along the way. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not against self-improvement. Actually, I think everyone should improve themselves. I think becoming healthier, learning, and building that discipline are some of the best things you can do for your life. But I think the biggest difference is the reason behind it. Are you improving because you respect yourself, or are you improving because you hate yourself? Because those are two different things that might look similar from the outside, but they feel completely different. And I think the goal shouldn't be becoming someone completely different. It should be becoming more yourself. Because the truth is, there will always be another goal. There will always be another fix. There's always someone ahead of you. So if you're waiting until you become perfect before you allow yourself to enjoy life, you're going to be waiting forever, homie. So how do you actually get out of this mindset? Honestly, I don't think there's some magic answer. I think the biggest thing that helped me was remembering that I'm more than just the person I'm trying to become. Because when you get really deep into the self-improvement concept, it's easy to start seeing yourself like a project. Like, you're not just a list of things that need fixing, but you're not. You're a real person. And sometimes you have to do things that remind you of that. For me, reading has been a big one. I read so many books, but it's not just about reading the books about becoming better. It's reading things that remind me why I wanted to improve in the first place. I love stories, right? I love fantasy stories, fiction stories, anything that pulls me out of my own head for a while. Because sometimes you don't need another piece of information telling you how to optimize your life. Sometimes you just need a reminder to actually experience it. And another thing that helped me was just spending time with people who don't care about my achievements. People who don't care if I'm being productive or if I'm chasing my goals. They just enjoy being around me. And I think that's something that's really important to remember, because the people who truly care about you aren't waiting for some future version of yourself to show up. They already value who you are right now. And sometimes being around those people is the reminder you need that you don't have to constantly earn your worth. You're allowed to improve, but you're also allowed to just exist. I think the biggest thing I've learned is that you can want more while still appreciating what you already have. Those two things can exist together. You can work toward a better future without hating your present, because one day you're going to look back at this exact moment and you might realize you had things you didn't even appreciate. You're going to miss the people around you, those random moments, the version of yourself that you were so focused on fixing. So yeah, improve yourself, get better, push yourself, but don't forget to actually live, because the whole point of becoming a better version of yourself isn't to finally earn the right to be happy. It's to create a life where you can be happy along the way. But yeah, that's just something I've been thinking about lately. I don't know. I feel like I've been yapping for long enough, so I'm going to let you guys go. So hopefully this video made you think about things just a little bit differently. And if you're on your own self-improvement journey, I hope you're able to keep pushing yourself while still enjoying the process. But yeah, that's all I had on my mind. I'll see you guys in the next one.